In the US, the State Department has released records related to its dealings with Ukraine. The near 100-page document was made public after a Freedom of Information lawsuit was brought by an ethics watchdog. It confirms multiple contacts between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, earlier this year. The exchanges took place in the months before the then US ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, was recalled. It supports testimony at the impeachment inquiry that senior officials were aware of efforts to pressure Kyiv into investigating Trump's rival Joe Biden. Let's go live now to Washington. Al Jazeera's John Hendren is there. John, what more is in these documents?
Well, these documents are the kind of documents that the Congressional Impeachment Inquiry has been looking for. They've repeatedly asked the Trump administration for information, and the Trump administration has stonewalled, saying it's not a legitimate inquiry, so they're not going to turn over the information. The State Department, any other department, is not turning over documents. Well, this organization, a group called American Oversight, did something different. They went through the Freedom of Information Act and requested these documents, and they got about 100 pages of them. And what they do is confirm much of what we have heard from witnesses in the impeachment inquiry. Those witnesses were saying that there were two diplomatic channels to Ukraine. There was the official channel, and then there was an unofficial one run by Rudy Giuliani, the president's private lawyer, and that the goal of that one was to try to get a commitment from the president of Ukraine to investigate President Trump's political rival, Joe Biden, whose son was working for a company called Burisma at that time, an energy company in Ukraine. And what these documents do is lay out repeated calls in which sometimes Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, called Giuliani in order to coordinate. And in doing so, he used the president's personal assistant, Madeleine Westerhout. And that just suggests that this was really all above board in terms of it being directed by the president. It wasn't Rudy Giuliani going rogue. There was coordination. And that confirms what we heard in impeachment testimony the other day from Ambassador Gordon Sondheim, the ambassador to the European Union. And he said everybody was in on the loop. Everybody knew that this was happening. He mentioned Mike Pompeo, Rudy Giuliani, the president's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney. So this really just adds some paper confirmation to the verbal testimony, and much of that has been denied by the administration.
And how, John, did these documents come to be published?
Well, they filed a Freedom of Information Act, which is an act saying that many documents which are should be accessible to the public can be made public upon request, and that's exactly what they did. But it's interesting that this private group has been able to get these documents out of the State Department at a time when Congress could not do so. Congress is being completely stonewalled. So you've got about 100 pages here that this organization was able to get a hold of that Congress was not able to get a hold of. And this will undoubtedly be used in the impeachment inquiry to show that the Trump administration was using official channels in order to help the president's private attorney persuade Ukraine to investigate the president's political rival.
Al Jazeera's John Hendren reporting live from Washington. John, many thanks. Well, Scott Lucas is Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. He says that Giuliani's calls to Pompeo were made in the backdrop of an alleged plan to discredit Joe Biden, his son Hunter, and Marie Yovanovitch.
But the phone calls are not the most important things in the documents. The phone calls were on the 26th and the 29th of March between Pompeo and Giuliani. Each was 4 minutes. We don't know what was in the calls. We just know they took place. But what we do know from the other documents is that someone, probably Giuliani's camp, was giving the State Department records of meetings that Giuliani, his two associates, the indicted businessmen Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, were meeting with the current and former prosecutor generals of Ukraine in January in New York. And the records of those meetings make explicit that the meetings were there to discredit Joe Biden and his son Hunter, a board member on a Ukrainian gas company, and to discredit the U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, who was subjected to a months-long campaign of disinformation by Giuliani till she was removed from her post in May. Now, we don't have anything that says that those documents were specifically provided to Pompeo, but the day before Pompeo's second call with Giuliani, there was a timeline prepared which set out all of the material about Biden, his son Hunter, and Marie Yovanovitch, trying to set up, in other words, a paper trail for the Secretary of State of these alleged activities by Biden and Yovanovitch that warranted an investigation by Ukraine.